Hello everyone, welcome again back to Real Estate Principles, and this time we're going to be going over chapter 22, 23, 24, and 25. And we all did real good on the tests this past test 4 that we just got back, and looking forward to doing the final exam coming up. And I can't believe that we're at the end of the semester already, so we're going to be just going over everything. The last exam is going to be a comprehensive exam over all the chapters. I'll try to, there'll be more weight on these last chapters than I'm going to do today, but then we're going to have comprehensive after that. So it'll be a collage of things. It shouldn't be too bad for you. And all the projects look good. They all came in. Some were late, but you know, with the times of everything going on, I know people are actually having to juggle a lot of different things at this time. So we're being lenient on the time situation. But everything's going good, and we're going to get started with chapter 22. Today we're going to be talking about fair housing, ADA, equal credit, and community reinvestment. Okay, major things in the market. The constitutional impact on ownership of real property. They say it's the most fundamental right in real property and obtained in the following amendments of the U.S. Constitution. There's the Fifth Amendment. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or the property without due process of law. Then you have the 13th Amendment. Prohibits slavery and involuntary servitude. And then the 14th Amendment, similar to the Fifth Amendment, but also prohibits any state from denying any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Okay, these are all written in there and been around for quite some time now. Fair housing laws. Okay, these laws are in stone and you have to abide by them, or you could get fined. The two major federal laws that prohibit discrimination in housing are Civil Rights Act of 1866 and the Fair Housing Act, officially known as Title VIII of the Civil Rights Act of 1968. Fair housing, this is a protected class, okay? A class of people that by law is protected from discrimination. It is illegal to discriminate or show a preference on the basis of, and I actually have this printed, I have to have it printed on the wall of your office, and it's got the same thing is right up there. And again, it's illegal to discriminate from race, color, religion, sex, national origin, handicap, or familial status. This is very, very important. There's been a lot of different lawsuits because of this happening throughout the country, and we actually make sure that it is abided by. Protected classes, okay? You have your fair housing, familial status handicap, okay? Handicapped people. Then in the middle you have race, color, religion, national origin, and sex. Equal Credit Opportunity Act on the other side. Public assistance, okay? Age, and marital status. So these are protected classes out there that you cannot discriminate against. Fair housing continued. The 1968 Fair Housing Law provides protection against the following acts if they discriminate against one or more of the protected classes. Okay? Refusing to sell or rent to, deal with, or negotiate with any person. Okay? Discrimination in the terms of conditions for buying or renting housing. And then discriminating by advertising that housing is available only to persons of a certain race, color, religion, sex, national origin, those who are not handicapped or adults only. Okay. Those protected classes are every 2 years when you get your training. If you get your license, they go over these over and over and over again because it's vital that you don't discriminate against people. Denying that housing is available for inspection, sale, or rent when it really is available. Okay? Denying or making different terms or conditions for home loans by commercial lenders. Denying to anyone the use of a participation in any real estate services such as brokers, organizations, multiple listing services, the MLS that's out there, or other facilities related to the selling or renting of housing. And then you can't steer or block bust. And we've talked about that before, and we'll talk about it more here coming up. In 1968, fair housing law applies to the following housing types. Okay, you got your single-family housing owners owned by private individuals when a real estate broker or other person in the business of selling or renting dwelling is used, and or discrimination advertising is used. Okay, discriminatory advertising. Number 2, single-family houses not owned by private individuals. That's another one. And then single-family houses owned by a private individual who owns more than 3 such houses, or who, in any 2-year period, sells more than one in which the individual was not the most recent resident. And you have multifamily dwellings of 5 or more units, and then multifamily dwellings containing 4 or fewer units, if the owner does not reside in one of those units. Okay? So we're going to talk about steering and blockbusting. All right, these were major things that happened, in the 60s and 70s that they really saw that they had to do something about. Steering. Okay, the legal practice of directing home seekers to particular neighborhoods. So you would say, okay, well, since you're in a particular class, you would like this section of town or this section of town, and you cannot do that. You have to show everybody every section of town and not try to steer them into a certain area. And then blockbusting, the legal practice of inducing panic selling in a neighborhood for financial gain. So if a builder went in, or an investment person, and bought up a bunch of houses and said, this nationality or somebody else is moving in, it's going to bring down the neighborhood, different, if you bring in a bunch of immigrants or whatever to a certain area, and trying to say that that's bad for the area, you cannot do that. Actually, immigrants are excellent for an area because it brings in diversification to that area. So it's a good thing and not a bad thing, so they can't, it's called blockbusting when you try and do something like that. Familia status. Familia status, one or more individuals under the age of 18 who are domiciled with a parent or other person having custody. Okay, so you can't discriminate. Fair housing enforcement. Okay, this is the major deal. The penalties for violation of the Act are severe. Tester, they have here. An individual or organization that responds to advertising and visits real estate offices to test for compliance with fair housing laws. So I could have a tester show up here at my office and say, okay, where's your fair housing enforcement plaque? Okay, and I have it right there up above the my licenses. It's good to have everything in one spot. That way they look, they see your licenses, they see all the fair housing situation. So it's good to have everything together. Americans with Disability Act. Handicapped. Having a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more life activities, or having a record of such impairment. The Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA. This deals primarily with commercial property, provides access requirements, and prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities. Okay? A lot of commercial buildings, they have to put up ramps, they have to have access for people in wheelchairs. It goes on and on. So this is a major act that was put out there, and you have to abide by it, or you could be fined. Equal Credit Opportunity Act. Okay? Federal law that provides for equal credit to borrowers. Okay? Originally passed to provide for equal credit for borrowers by making it unlawful to discriminate against an applicant for credit based or sex or marital status. Prohibits discrimination in any credit transaction based on race, color, religion, national origin, sex, marital status, age. Okay, you hear this over and over. Not including minors. receipt of income from a public assistance program, and the good faith exercise of rights under the ECOA, okay, Equal Credit Opportunity Act. Now they came out with a Community Reinvestment Act. They actually did a large Community Reinvestment Act when President Trump just got in office. They're doing major areas of around the city areas of many cities. Federal state encouraging federal regulators lenders to increase their participation in low-income areas. This expands the concept that regulated financing institutions must serve the needs of their communities. They can't discriminate. Institution must post CRA notice in a public lobby of its main office and in each branch of the office. The CRA notice informs consumers that they are entitled to certain information about the operations of the lender and its performance under the CRA. Okay, so that's Community Reinvestment Act. That's going on right now, all over the country. We have key terms. We're going to be going through these pretty quickly because we have 4 different chapters to go through for this next test. But we have the key terms of American Disability Act. It's huge. Block busting, community reinvestment, equal credit opportunity, familiar status, handicap, protected class, steering, and tester. Okay? So, for the code for chapter 22 is going to be block busting. Okay? It's going to be block busting. I'm going to actually write that down. I don't forget. So, let's see here. Look at all these drawers over here. I've got too many things. Gotta get a post-it note. So, we're going to do chapter 22. And the code word is block busting. Excellent. So, let's go over the first 5 questions here of the review questions, and that way we'll get you started on that. So number 1, this is on page 416. Discrimination in the availability of housing on the basis of race is prohibited by, and then you have A and B, both A and B. Civil Rights Act of 1866, and also the Fair Housing Law of 1968. Okay, so that's both of those. Number 2, Vera, a real estate broker, was offered a rental listing by a homeowner who stated that he would not rent the property to a person of certain religious beliefs. Vera should, and they're saying it's A on this one, refuse to accept the listing of the terms, because you cannot discriminate against people. So they say, okay, this happens quite often. I've lived in this house 25 years. I'm really fond of it. I want to make sure this certain person gets in here. You can't do that. That's called discrimination. They used to do that back in the day, and that's why they put these laws in. So, cannot do that. Number 3, under federal law, the owner of one single-family dwelling in which the owner has residence for 10 years, who does not employ an agent or does not use discrimination advertising, may discriminate in the sale of rental of the property on any of the following except, and then it's B, race. Okay? So, B, number 3. Number 4, state and local laws that restrict or prohibit discrimination in the availability of rental housing may, and this is C, both A and B, be more restrictive than federal status, and also prohibit additional forms of discrimination. All right. Number 5, the Civil Rights Act of 1866 prohibits, and they're saying A here, racial discrimination. Okay? You cannot discriminate. And if you could just finish those for the review questions for homework, we're going to get to chapter 23. And I bet you remember what the code word was for 22, so I don't have to repeat it. Bet. So let's get out of here. We're going to go to 23. Here we go. see the screen better. We actually lowered the resolution, the brightness on it, so hopefully that shows up better for you. And we're going to go to slideshow from beginning. So this 23 is what a lot of people live in right now. Condominiums, cooperatives, PUDs, planned unit developments, and timeshares. Okay. 23, here we go. Desire for land use efficiency. Okay, so they're trying to do a carbon footprint that is less than a big subdivision that has many houses all over and taking up all the land and doing all this other stuff. They say, hey, let's do efficiency, especially in the big cities. They have everybody together. Of the forces responsible for creating the need for condominiums, cooperatives, and planned unit developments, PUDs, the most important are, land scarcity in desired areas. Look at New York City. 7 miles long and 4 miles wide? Really congested. We have 8 million people or something. Land scarcity is desirable in areas. Okay. Continuing escalation in construction costs. It's another thing. Disenchantment with the work of maintaining the grounds around a house, which everybody knows it's a pain in the butt to go out and mow your lawn. It's kind of nice at the beginning of the season. It's like, oh man, it's all nicely cut. But when it gets about 100 degrees outside, everybody's really not enjoying it. And then the desire to own rather than to rent. My grandfather, he never wanted to actually own property. He just wanted to rent. So he never owned his own home, which a lot of people is like, oh man, that's the American dream, to own your own home. There's millions of people out there who do not want the upkeep of a house. They want the mobility to be able to say, hey, after my lease is up, my rent, I can move, I can do whatever I want, I'm not tied to this place, I don't have to try to sell it, all this other stuff. But again, he wasn't able to build up wealth of being able to buy a place and then resell it and keep on building that staircase that we talked about before, to be able to get more wealth down the road. So he did it in other ways, but the real estate, being able to own, is a way of gathering great wealth for some people. But a lot of people just want to rent. They don't want to be tied down, which is fine. Comparison of estates. Okay, so you have presumed simple ownership in each case. So you have the house there. Okay, you own the sky and then the earth to the center of the earth down. Vertical line of the condominium. In a condominium, you actually own within the walls of the condominium. Okay, people take care of the outside of it. A townhouse, you own the house itself up to that wall that's connected to the other townhouse next to you. And also, there's lines outside that you own of a townhouse. It's different than the condominium. Condominium, it's being taken care of everywhere on the outside. The townhouse, you have to actually, usually, if you don't have high association fees, that they take care of this stuff for you, you have to take care of that. You have to mow your own area, all that. And then a cooperative is actually just with a corporation that you lease, or you can rent, however they have it set up, or you could be a part of a investor in the corporation. Okay, so there's many ways that that's set up. It gets kind of complicated on that. And then that's usually within the walls of your place again that you own. Condominium. Individual ownership for a space of air plus undivided ownership of the common elements. Okay, so everybody owns the common areas outside. It's taken care of for you. But it's kind of like, if you have a grill out there and one of your neighbors are out grilling, then you have to wait for them to be done. Or you say, hey, slide over your meat, I'm going to go ahead and cook next to you. I don't think that's going to work too good. So it's a shared and a respected ownership between people. So you have to share stuff. Separate elements there in a condominium, exclusively owned and used by the individual owners. And then common elements, areas owned by all the unit owners, which we just talked about. Condominium Owners Association. Okay, These can be pretty high dollar in some places. You could pay between $300 and $500 a month just for the association fee to be part of a condominium. A legal framework allowing unit owners can govern themselves. Okay, so it's actually got a board of people that usually it's homeowners that get elected to the board, and if anybody has any issues, then they try to address those issues. Condominium rules. You have bylaws. Okay, rules by which the owners associations operates. There's several different bylaws. Some of them where you can't actually park a mobile home outside. There's a whole list of different things. What you can put on the outside of your door, how you advertise your place if you're going to rent it out, if you can rent it out. Some of them you can't even do that. So it all depends. You have to really look at those bylaws before you sign. Covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Okay, and that's CC and R's. You will hear that a lot, CC and R. So it's covenants, condition, and restriction. Filed list of regulations by which anyone purchasing a unit in the condominium must abide to those. Okay, you see this dude over here looking at it going, I better abide by these. Maintenance fees. Okay, so you have maintenance fee, the cost of maintaining the common elements in a condominium, allocated among unit owners. Generally collected monthly. They go into a reserves, and taxes and insurance are usually part of that. One thing that they might take care of, they take care of the roof. Okay, they take care of the windows. A lot of times they'll actually clean the windows on the outside of condominiums for the owners. You've seen these. Go over to China. You'll see these are condominiums that are high rises of. Some of them have their own zip code. They're so large. Thousands and thousands of people live in one huge area of a condominium. So it's a lot of big cities have many condominiums throughout. The financing, because each condominium unit can be separately owned, each can be separately financed. Okay, so it's just like your little house. It's your area, your space, so you can actually buy. And then you can resell later for a profit. I sold a condominium in Nashville for a friend of mine. And he did really well. It was a brand new condominium. He moved into it. He got the special deal because it was brand new. And he turned around 5 years later and made over $100,000 on it. It's right next to Vanderbilt. So it's a good investment. A lot of families will put their kids in a condominium close to the university. They go ahead and buy it, and then whenever 4 years or 5 years after they leave the university, they go ahead and sell it and make profit on it. So it's a good deal for the parents. Condo living. Okay, advantages and disadvantages. There's several. Advantages: you have low cost, so utilities are low. Usually everybody's connected, so you don't have outside walls a lot of times that you have to heat and cool. Low maintenance. Location, okay, you're right next to whatever you want to be, downtown area. Amenities, and then ownership. And then with amenities, they might have an area where they have exercise equipment for you, a common pool, and also they have the one that I sold actually had a coffee bar in there with pool tables and all of that stuff. Very nice. Disadvantages: close proximity to all. Okay, loss of control, fees, board of directors you have to deal with, and then the bylaws. Okay, so that's the different disadvantages of them. So we have cooperative apartments. Cooperative. This is land and building owned or leased by a corporation that in turn leases space to its shareholders. Okay, so you actually buy shares into the corporation. Proprietary lease. A lease issued by a cooperative to its shareholders. Financing, default, resale, and government. Okay. Planned unit development. Okay, I actually live in planned unit development here in Franklin. It's not only individual homes, they have townhomes, and they have condominiums. So it's all throughout the neighborhood, different areas. They have villages and this and that. It's very common these days they do that. That way they can have a diverse group of people that actually can live in one area. So individual owned lots and houses with community ownership of common areas. Okay, so in the back of my house, there's a lake, man-made lake, that there's a common area that people can go into. And then you have the common pool, and then other areas of a trail and walking areas. So it's you can see how that works for planned unit development. Resort time sharing. Okay, resort time sharing, a method of dividing up and selling a living unit at a vacation facility or specific lengths of time each year. Okay, so timeshare. You have to have a timeshare license to be able to sell these timeshares. You go to Gatlinburg, a lot of other different areas that will have timeshares, and you have that unit, and it's done by calendar, and you just pick which month usually that you want to stay in your timeshare, and then that's set up for you. Now there's other owners of that timeshare, so someone might want to fill that space where you had before, so there's a little bit of negotiation there. And then a lot of people don't have enough time to go to their timeshare sometimes, so it's not the best investment in the world. I'm not going to say anything about it, but there's a lot of people that try to get out of their timeshares, because once you're in there, you're locked in for quite some time. So, right to use. This is a contract right to occupy a living unit for 1 week a year for a term between 20 to 40 years. Okay, so once you're in that contract for 20 to 40 years, it's kind of set in stone. Now there's some companies out there that will try to get you out of that timeshare. I don't know really how that works, but it's dealing with the law and everything. So just know, these timeshare companies will try to get you to buy a timeshare, so they'll give you free nights at a hotel, free dinner, and then they'll do a orientation with you and try to sell you that timeshare. They make a big, huge thing about it. So just be careful. Read up real good before you go about timeshares, and just make up your mind. I went to one myself, and we did not buy one, but well, they try to get us to do so. Fee simple. This is right to fee ownership of part of each year in perpetuity. Okay, so that's fee simple ownership, which is the best kind of ownership, right? Fee simple. We talked about that before in prior chapters. So we have key terms here. Again, bylaws, covenants, common elements, condominium, cooperative, limited common elements. All right, planned unit development. All pretty straightforward stuff here. Property lease, reserve, and resort time sharing. So pretty easy stuff, but it's just a little bit of introduction to all that this class is. So now let's go over the 5 questions at the end of the chapter here. Review questions, just to get you started. So we're on page 435. State laws that provide the legal framework for condominium ownership may be identified by any of the following terms except, and we're looking at B, okay? Cooperative Housing Act. Number 2, condominium developments are restricted to, and we're looking at D, neither A nor B, okay? It's condominium developments are restricted to, and we went over those restrictions earlier. In order to create a condominium development, a developer may, and it's both A and B, so that's C, okay? Construct a new building, convert an existing building, okay? So they can do either of those. Number 4, individual units in a condominium development are classed as, and this is separate property, all right? So that's A. And then number 5, within a condominium development, common elements are owned by, and it's B, all unit owners who hold undivided interest in the elements around. Okay, so I get you started on those review questions, and we're gonna keep on rolling down the road and go to chapter 24 here. And so, what are we supposed to do? What's the code word? Everybody keeps on asking, right? What's the code word for chapter 23? And I'm going to put down reserve, okay? So the code is reserve. For what chapter? Chapter 23. All right. So we got that down. So let's get out of this one. We're going to go to chapter 24. Only 2 more chapters, and we're done for the year. I can't believe we got through the whole book. All right, slideshow. Here we go, land use control. The government loves to try to control land use a lot of times because it's in their interest to do so. So let's see what it says. Land use control. A broad term that describes any legal restriction that controls how a parcel of land may be used. Okay? So public controls. You have zoning, building codes, right? Subdivision regulations, and master plans. So whenever a builder goes in and he's going to do a subdivision, he has to show the master plans to the city. And that way they say, okay, well, we'll go ahead and say okay to that. They have to approve it. Private controls. And this is deed restrictions, okay? Zoning laws, public regulations that control the specific use of land, okay? This is usually voted on by the area of the city that you're trying to do any kind of change to with the land. So it's got to go in front of the zoning board, and they'll review it. They'll actually get people from the area. They'll say, okay, we're going to have a zoning change. Do you want to show up for the meeting? And they'll actually have a meeting about changing a certain area. That way everybody knows about it, because later on people will say, hey, how did that apartment complex get put there? That was, land that we could use for something else. Well, they have a zoning gathering, and they go over that use for it. This is based on the principle of using separation. Some land uses are incompatible with others and should not be permitted in the same area. Okay, so you don't want. Okay, so if you have a trash dump and it wants to go, like BFI wants to make a trash dump here in Franklin, and they want to put it right down from the square. Well, they're not going to get zoning for that, because everybody would go up in arms at the meeting and say, no way, we're not going to have that put in here. So that's what this is used for. Continued zoning laws. Zoning laws divide land into zones, districts, and with each zone they are regulated, the purpose for which buildings may be constructed, control the height and bulk of the buildings. Here in Franklin, you can only get 4 stories. You see all these big business buildings. Now, Nissan got a waiver. I think they're 7 stories tall. There's a few buildings that they rezoned just that area for that size of building. So it's major. But usually people will try to stick with the 4 or 5 stories here in Franklin. Establish lot area requirements. Okay. Set the number of parking spaces. Dave Ramsey just put in a building, and he has like 1,000 parking spaces, and it looks like they're building a garage right next to the building there at the Ramsey building. Manage the number of persons that buildings can accommodate. Okay, so everything depends on fire codes, how many people you can have on each floor, over and over, just a list of things that all these zoning codes and laws are about. Common zoning symbols. For convenience, zones are identified by code abbreviations such as R for residential, C for commercial, I for industrial, A for agriculture, M for manufacturing. Not too bad. Other important zoning terms: land use restrictions, enforcement, non-conforming use, which is not conforming to the area, right? Amendment, variance, conditional use permit, spot zoning. Okay, so like I said, Nissan was actually the spot zone because they went up higher with their building. So they I had to go and talk about that with the board also. Down zoning, taking, buffer zone, which is zone in between buildings, legality and value. Okay. Subdivision regulations, and there's a bunch of them. Before a building lot can be sold, a subdivider must comply with government regulations concerning street construction, okay, curbs, how big the curb has to be, sidewalks, how wide, okay, there's all different sizes of sidewalks, street lighting, it's got to match the other lighting in the area, okay, fire hydrants, where the fire hydrant is going to be going, storm and sanitary sewers, okay, that's got to be put all through, especially around close to, they're doing it more and more. It all depends on how close it is to cities, but a lot of them are doing sanitary sewers throughout these neighborhoods, even further out from the city. That way they can have all underground utilities and city water. So they're doing that more and more these days. Used to, they would have people, big subdivisions that had an acre or more, they would have their own septic tank on the property. But over time, septic tanks have to be, emptied and all that other stuff. So people really like sewers. That way they don't have to mess with a septic tank. Grading and compacting of soil, right? Water and utility lines, which people these days with the new neighborhoods, they do not want to see poles up in the air. They want everything underground, which I see that everywhere. Underground utility lines, and actually that's actually better for storms also. Electricity usually doesn't get knocked out when you have underground lines. Very seldom it does. Minimum lot size, okay, so it has to be a certain minimum or maximum, and so on. A subdivider may be required to either set aside land for schools and parks or provide money so that land for that purpose may be purchased nearby. Okay? Building codes. So you establish minimum accepted material and construction standards needed to protect public health and safety, including standards for structural load and stress. So you have to have the buildings constructed enough. You saw that one building in China, they were constructing, and it actually the load was too much for the building and it fell. And there was people, it was being constructed at the time, so it was workers in there that actually got killed. But it's a structural load and stress on a building, so it's got its own code. Windows and ventilation, they have different codes for the windows. Some of them have to be sun blocked with UV lighting. It all depends on the company, what they want. Ventilation has to be a certain amount of vents within a room for the air quality, so it's able to, move around the air and also get taken out of the building and then reprocessed. Size and location of rooms, fire protection. We have codes now here in Franklin that you have to have fire extinguishers in all the buildings. So they went in. We have, I have a organ company, pipe organ company also, and we have an organ in Franklin that they went in and they had to put water lines right in the area of the organ. So if something happened with the organ and it caught on fire, then it would put out the fire. But if anything ever happens in the church and that sprinkler system goes off, then they're looking at $500,000 worth of damage to the organ, because once it gets wet, you have to redo the whole thing. So we were like, oh my Lord, they have to put water lines in. But that's the way it is. It's codes. So that's what you have to deal with. Exit signs, you have to have, they have to have their own sign near the doors for any kind of commercial building, of course. Or just buildings where you have a certain amount of people to be able to exit. They gotta know where the exits are. Electrical installation, you got the plumbing, heating, lighting, and so much more. Certificate of occupancy. Now, this is a government-issued document that states that the structure meets local zoning and building code requirements and is ready for use. Okay, so you cannot any kind of new construction, you have to have a certificate. It's COO. Okay, the realtor will ask you, hey, did the COO come in for Mr. Joe's new house? And what that is a certificate saying yes, everything's been checked, looks good, and it's ready for occupancy. So very important. You cannot have a closing and close a loan for a house that doesn't have a certificate of occupancy at the time. So, deed restrictions. Clauses placed in deeds and leases to control how future owners and leases may or may not use a property. Okay? Also known as restrictive covenants. When you buy into a HUD or PUD, Planned Unit Development, they'll give you the guidelines of the restrictions. So it's usually a pretty good thick pamphlet. So you got to make sure to read all that prior to closing on your house. That way you know what's expected of you. In other words, restrictions on land use that an owner places in the deed to control future development. Okay, so there's deed restrictions there. So there's many different restrictions. Like I said, planning and ahead of development. Since uncoordinated land use can have a negative impact on both the quality of life and the economic vitality of the community, more attention is now being directed toward land use master plans to guide the development of towns, cities, districts, coastlines, and even whole states. Okay? Now you have a master plan, a comprehensive guide for the physical growth of a community, also known as a general plan or comprehensive plan. My father started a subdivision in right outside of MTSU. It's called Green. It's right off Greenland Drive. Rutherford Green, it's called. Okay, because Greenland and Rutherford intersects right there, so it's called Rutherford Green. He had to have a master plan. So this was 20 years ago now, but he set out the whole plan on the board, and he showed the whole family. He said, "This is what I want for the subdivision," and he wanted everybody to. It was duplexes where it was townhouses put together, and nice sidewalks, nice old lighting. Mailboxes were nice, so he had to have that master plan, and then he took that and he gave it to the city, and then they had to approve that master plan, and it had to be zoned, all that stuff. So it's a major, major deal if you want to start your own subdivision. You have to do an incredible amount of work before the first board is even laid. There's so much that goes into it, months and months of work. So it's when you see a new subdivision go up and completed, it's a major deal. Environmental impact study. Okay? Environmental impact study used to determine the effect of a proposed project on a total environment, also called an environment impact report. Okay? Includes in the EIS, probable impact of the area, adverse environmental effects. Okay, that's huge these days. Everything's about the environment, so you have to make sure that you're not doing anything to even the turtles that are walking by. You got to make sure that they have access to be able to cross. Alternatives to the proposed project, short-term and long-term effects of the proposed project on the environment. Again, listing of any irreversible commitment of resources in the project is implemented. So you have environmental laws, okay? Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation and Liability Act, okay? So you got CER, CLA, and then you have Clean Water Act. So those are two different acts that you have with environmental laws. So who does those environmental laws are the EPA. Now the EPA has gotten over the years, a lot of power. And some of those laws have been relaxed a little, and that actually has helped to build this past 3 years in the economy. But they also have to have structure and somebody looking over that, making sure that everything is up to par. So all appropriate inquiries the rule defining exactly what constitutes due diligence criteria. Okay? Provides innocent landowner defense to, and then the CERCLA again. Okay? Transferable development rights. This is planning and zoning intend to provide windfall gains for the owners of land authorized for development, while landowners who are prohibited from developing their land suffer financial wipeouts. All right. Transferable development rights, TDRs. Planning idea to eliminate windfalls and wipeouts. Development rights can be transferred to land where greater density will not be objectable. Okay? So it's transferable development rights. So on this one, with land use control, key terms, we got your building codes, like we talked about, certificate of occupancy, you can't have it, you can't close a house or building, commercial or anything without the COO. Downsizing or downzoning, environmental impact, land use control, you have your master plan of your development, non-conforming use, restricted covenants, variance, and then zoning law. All right. So let's go over the first 5 questions again of chapter 24 to get you started there. And again, for the last test, I'm going to use several of these on the test, so that way it's not all comprehensive, but it kind of is. I'll try to use many of these review questions on there, so it makes it a little bit easier for everybody. Number 1, through zoning, a community can protect existing land users from all of the except. Okay, so you got it's D, competitive business establishments. Number 2, land use controls may be imposed by, and it's D, all the above. State governments, local governments, okay, subdivision developers. So all 3 of those can put controls on land use. 3, zoning laws may not be used to regulate which of the following. And we're looking at C, the placement of interior partitions, because it's interior of the walls. Okay, that's actually your area. The basic authority of zoning laws is derived from a state's, and it's neither A or B. It's both A and B. It's not both A and B, it's neither A and B. It's D. The basic authority of zoning laws is derived from a state's, and it's neither. Zoning laws, number 5, and it tells a landowner the use to which land may be put. Okay, that's your zoning laws. So just do 6 through 17. 17 for the for homework, and we're going to do the code for chapter 25. It's going to be zoning law. How about that one? Because it's so important. And I'm going to do chapter 25. Okay. So, chapter 23. 24. Excellent. All right. So, let's go back here. And I'm going to go back. And we're going to do all right. So, chapter 22. Let's go back real quick. Here. Just going to look here real quick because I want to make sure that we covered everything here. Chapter 22, we got block busting, right? For the code. And chapter 23. Doing that. Excuse me for a sec. And so chapter 25, we have zoning law. Chapter 24. That's right. Was reserve. Chapter 23 was reserve. Okay. And look here, chapter 24. And we're going to do for chapter 24, okay, because I forgot to do so. Sorry about that. Let's see. Because they talk about both of these in the same one. Oh no, that was chapter 24 there. Okay. Alright, to get everybody on track here, okay. Chapter 22, the code is block busting, okay. Chapter 23, reserve, right? And then chapter 24 is zoning law, okay. So those are the three. And now we have chapter 25. Let me look at chapter 25 again here. So, chapter 25 we have here. Investing in real estate, our last chapter, okay? So, I went over the codes again. So I'll do it one more time since I had a little brain freeze there because I thought we didn't do 25 yet. So chapter 22, code is block busting. Chapter 23 is reserve. 24 is zoning law. Okay, and then 25 I'll tell you here in a minute. So let's go ahead and get started here. And all right, investing in real estate. Everybody wants to know about investing in real estate these days. Benefits of real estate investing. The monetary benefits of investing in real estate come from, and then we have cash flow, gives you cash flow, positive cash flow, negative cash flow. Sometimes it all depends. Right now there's a lot of people that aren't being able to pay their rents or mortgage, so that's going to be actually a negative cash flow in the future for some people. And then cash on cash, tax shelter. You're able to deduct your interest payments on your mortgage usually. It's a tax shelter each year when you file your taxes. And some people pay a whole lot of money in interest payments. So that's a good tax shelter that you can have. Mortgage reduction, and then appreciation. Your house is going to appreciate over time. So appreciation when you go to sell later on. That's a huge uptick in cash. So it's really good. Benefits defined, okay? Appreciation, an increase in property value over time, okay? We just talked about that. Mortgage reduction, the decline of the mortgage balance as payments are made, okay? So as you make payments, of course your mortgage comes down, right? As you make payments, you have your principal and your interest that you pay. So the interest actually starts, the interest payments start to go down, right, as the mortgage goes down. You're actually paying more at the end of the 30-year loan. You'll be paying more each month of the principal balance instead of interest. And that you'll see that later. Cash flow, money left each year after paying property, operating expenses, and debt service. Okay, they actually have a chart for that here coming up. And a tax shelter. Tax deductible expenses generated by investment property. So whenever you have a rental unit, anything you put into that rental unit, like new paint, appliances, anything else, you're able to take that money and deduct it from your taxes you pay each year from from the income. Cash flow projections. Okay, so you have rent receipts for the year at $48,000, less operating expenses, costs about $25,000. Okay, less mortgage loan payments of $20,000 on the place equals a cash flow of $3,000. Okay, doesn't seem much money for cash flow for a property, but it all depends on how much you owe on that property. Of course, if you paid off the property, then it would be an extreme amount that you would get monthly and for the year for the cash flow. But this person has a large mortgage on the property, so that's the deal. That's why it's not as much of a cash flow. Investment benefits. Improvement terms related to real estate investments and taxes include: you have tax shelter, any tax-deductible expense generated by an investment property, interest, maintenance, insurance, property taxes, and depreciation. Okay, that's your tax shelter. And then you have depreciation over time, which they'll show here in a minute. Taxable loss. Okay, you got rent receipts for the year, $48,000, less operating expenses, $25,000, less interest of loan, $19,500, less depreciation of $8,000. So property can depreciate over time. Equals taxable income of $4,500 there. Okay, so you see how it's all broken out. Depreciation. They have straight line depreciation. Depreciation is equal amounts each year over the life of the asset. You have minimum depreciation period for residential is 27.5 years. Okay, so property will actually, once it's built, and from that first year, it usually appreciates pretty well for 27.5 years, and then it might start to flatten out. And then some properties actually, if they're not taken care of, will actually go down in value. So they say about 27.5 years for that minimum depreciation period. And then for commercial, it's 39 years. So usually commercial is built by brick and mortar, steel, everything else. So it's usually a little bit more well-built building instead of just a regular house. So they give it 39 years. Additional investing concepts. Some additional investing concepts include capital gains. Okay, so as you know, we talked about capital gains before. Usually whenever you sell a piece of property, and so if you've lived in the property for the past 5 years, you're able, between 2 and 5 years, then you're able to go ahead and not pay any taxes on that capital gains. And the capital gains is what the property sells for, okay, and what you owed on the property. Okay, so that's your gain right there. So at-risk rules that limit write-off to the amount actually invested plus resource. Installment sales. Then you got construction period expenses. Okay, pretty straightforward. Rehabilitation tax credits. Okay, 10% of rehabilitation non-historic structures and 20% of rehabilitation historic structures is tax credit of 10% and 20%. Okay. Low-income housing credit. The government will actually give you housing credit if you buy in a certain area sometimes, or in places that are closer to certain districts. They'll give you a tax credit. And then a watch list, right? So you just want to watch the market. Calculating equity buildup. Equity at time of purchase, and then equity 5 years later, and then equity buildup. Okay, so you see purchase price of $200,000. Okay, 5 years later it's $220,000, right? And then the current equity is $100,000. Mortgage loan of $140,000, and then you paid it down to $120,000. So it's right at around $60,000. The equity buildup. Then a down payment of $60,000 equals current equity of $100,000, right? Equity buildup of $40,000. So you actually paid down that property by that $40,000 there, because you have that equity now. A lot of times you'll see that banks want to do a home equity line of credit, and that's what they look at. They say, okay, how much equity do you have in your house? and equity is the difference between what you owe on the house and what it's worth, right? And they'll do an appraisal on it to see what it's worth for that time while they're doing your home equity line of credit. So, if you bought a house for $100,000 and you paid it down to $80,000, then your equity is the $20,000, and they'll give you a loan a lot of times, home equity loan for that $20,000, and you can either use it to put new stuff in your house or pay down different credit cards. There's many different things that people use home equity lines of credit for. I actually use one for investing. What we do is we have a paid off house, so we have a home equity line of credit, and we just use that to buy commercial property. And then once we have that, all the interest, you can have an interest-only loan, and then all that interest is deductible on your next year's taxes that you pay. So it really is a win-win situation on that. So you're able to use the equity of your home to do other investments or just to reinvest into your house. Leverage. The impact that borrower funds have on investment return. Okay? So here you see leverage of 80% and then leverage of 50%. Got the purchase price of $100,000. You put $20,000 down. You get a loan for $80,000. Well, your leverage is 80%. A lot of times, the new mortgages, the conventional mortgage is 80-20 loan, so you have to pay 20% down to get that. They'll usually give you a better interest rate because you're less likely to foreclose, and it's a better deal for them. So until it's down to 80%, a lot of times the loans, you'll have to have PMI, and we talked about PMI before, and that actually, if you foreclose on the property, that's an insurance that they have that will make up that difference, that 20%, that the bank will actually get that back. So it's kind of like an insurance policy for the bank. Then over here, you got purchase price of $500,000, cash down $250,000, loans $250,000, and then leverage there is 50%. An investor only needs $20,000 to control $100,000 worth of property, or 20 cents cash for each $1 of cost. And that's it for this chapter. We got key terms here: appreciation, cash flow, cash on cash, downside, risk, equity buildup, leverage, mortgage reduction, negative cash flow, straight line appreciation, tax shelter. So that's all about investing in real estate. There on chapter 25, let me go over the first 5 here. And again, I can't believe we're already to the end of the book. It's been this whole semester has been very fast, but it's been unusual since we've had to actually have it at home for most of it. But hopefully next semester we'll all be back in school again. We'll see what happens. Number 1, ABC Realty offers you a 4-unit residential building in which each unit rents for $500 per month. Given a 5% vacancy rate, operation expenses of $700 per month, and mortgage payments of $1,500 per month, you can anticipate a monthly, and all you do is plug it in just like we had before, and then negative cash flow of $300, and that's D. Okay. Number 2, monetary benefits of investing in real estate come from, and it's all the above. You have cash flow, you have tax shelter, and mortgage reduction on there. Number 3, a negative cash flow may be offset by, and both A and B. Okay, so it's C. You can have tax shelter and also appreciation. Number 4, mortgage balance reduction is, and it's A, so out-of-pocket expense. All right. And number 5, the value of depreciation on investment property is, and they're saying C here, directly proportional to an investor's tax bracket. Okay, so of course you want to know what the code is for chapter 25, and I'm going to say cash flow, because that is a major deal with this chapter. So we got all the different codes. I just wish I could have been with you guys for this past semester the whole time. I have a million different stories. Doing it this way, it's hard to tell stories and have enough time for all that because lo and behold, just uploading this video here takes several hours to upload it to YouTube. So I don't try to go on and on and on about different examples, but I just appreciate you guys watching and getting everything you can out of this introduction to real estate. I hope you stick with real estate and try to get your license in the future. I gave everybody one of my cards, contact, so if you have any questions in the future about real estate or anything else, just give me a call anytime. My number's on the card. Just enjoyed everybody, all different personalities in the class. It's been interesting trying to get some of the projects and other things from people, but again, this is crazy times we're living in with the virus going around, so sorry that it's been difficult on everybody, but hopefully we're all together on this. We're going to have one more test, and I'll put all the grades out there, and again, everybody's done an incredible job, so we should all get pretty good grades this season. So thank you again for everything, and hopefully be able to see everybody next semester. So we'll talk to you soon. Bye.